It's This Week in Creationism, episode number 41. I'm your host, Joel Duff, and here I take a look at things going on in creationism from the past week. A little video caught my eye the last couple days. It was posted by Dr. Nathaniel Jeanson, who's a prominent employee at Answers in Genesis, Ken Ham's organization. Nathaniel Jeanson posted a video to his Rumble and YouTube account, his personal accounts, and we'll get into why I think that's significant in a few minutes. And the video is aimed at an Arabic-speaking audience. That got me thinking about the relationship of Answers in Genesis, or Young Earth Creationism in the United States, and Islamic Young Earth Creationism. So today we have TRACED, Jeanson, and Ken Ham's relationship with Islamic Young Earth Creationism. Is there a relationship? If there's not, why not? Let's talk about that coming up. So now here's the video that sparked my interest and is the topic for today's This Week in Creationism. I noticed Nathaniel Jeanson posted a link on his Twitter profile, on his Twitter account. I followed that link. That link took me to this video, which he posted on Rumble. This is his personal Rumble account, not the Answers in Genesis Rumble account. I also looked on Facebook, and Nathaniel Jeanson also posted this link on Facebook. On Facebook, though, he linked to a YouTube account, his personal YouTube account. So once again, not to the Answers in Genesis web account, but to his own personal his own personal YouTube account. So what's going on here? I was curious. I've noticed something, I'll say, interesting about Nathaniel Jeanson and his and who's interested in his work, and that is a number of different Arabic speakers have been followers of Nathaniel Jeanson. I'm going to show you his Twitter account in a moment, and we'll talk about that. But first, what I do is I want to talk about this video. I just want to describe what he's doing in this video. And then we'll talk about the relationship of Nathaniel Jeanson's approach to Islamic Young Earth Creationism, or an Arabic-speaking audience, versus the approach of Ken Ham, and I'll say, which is basically the official approach or response to Islamic creationism from Answers in Genesis. All right, so here's the video. Again, posted on Rumble. Interesting that he would point his audience, this particular audience, from Twitter. He points to his Rumble account. And here's the video, and you can see it's been translated. This is, if you've ever seen any of Nathaniel Jeanson's other talks, this is the same boilerplate introduction that he has for a number of the different discussions and videos he's done with Ken Ham and are posted on the Answers in Genesis website. And so he's had this translated into the Arabic language. And what happens in this particular video is that he has a very short introduction in which he just says what he's going to do. And then he proceeds to give one of his kind of standard science talks, describing what he is trying to accomplish in the book TRACED, which is his most recent book, which is tracing human migrations and history through the Y chromosome. He's doing this with a translator, so he is speaking in English, and then the translator comes and converts that to Arabic. And you can see his slides have been redone in Arabic. Somebody is obviously helping him to do this. Actually, I shouldn't say obviously. I mean, maybe he knows the Arabic language himself. It certainly seems like he has a distinct interest in reaching people in the Middle East. So the video goes through it. Now, what I want to say about the video is it's not your typical Answers in Genesis video. It's not the typical Nathaniel Jeanson video. He does a number of different talks in which he is pretty much mostly straight science, is just trying to explain his results, so say why they're significant. But of course, he's going to talk about Noah and biblical history and how this fits with the Bible. And he does do that just to a tiny extent here in part 1. We'll see what happens in part 2 and part 3. But in his introduction, he notably does not talk about answers in Genesis. He really doesn't talk about his position. He simply says he's described and introduced as being a geneticist or a scientist who studies human history. And then he proceeds to describe his results. And at the end, there's not the usual thing which you would expect with an Answers in Genesis video, which is a long litany of selling you products. That's what it comes down to. Like all Answers in Genesis things are either, a bit of gospel message and then, hey, you can find out more. And here's all these things you can buy. Wonderful things from Answers in Genesis to learn more from. All right. So this video kind of stands apart as being I'll call it sort of neutral, all right, with respect to the gospel message. There really isn't a gospel presentation in this particular thing. It is just straight, here's my interpretation of this Y chromosome data. I'm making a big deal about this for a reason, this distinction. And along with this being a kind of having a different flavor, this particular video, I'm also pointing you to the fact that this is not published on an Answers in Genesis website. So this seems like it's a personal project, right? This seems like, obviously Ken Ham is given permission to do this. For one thing, he is speaking from his office at Answers in Genesis. That's what it appears. And he is using the template, the PowerPoint template that Answers in Genesis provides for their speakers. And so in that way, he is, I guess, representing Answers in Genesis. But this seems more like something that is, these views don't necessarily represent those of my employer. I might be, I'm obviously employed by this other organization, but here's my own personal project and here's something I'm doing that is a personal passion of mine. Yeah. Oh, this is a picture of him talking from his office on this. So he's got a multi-series coming up, and he has pitched this on Getter and on Truth Social and his other accounts. But the most interesting account that Nathaniel Jeanson has, I think, social media account, is his Twitter account. And I've mentioned this before because we talked about social media just 2 episodes ago. So if you look up episode 39, we talked about Ken Ham branching out into alternative social media sites. And I said that Nathaniel Jeanson was an early adopter of Truth Social and Getter and some of these other alternative alt-right social media accounts. And he often promotes those above others. So at the end of his talks, which he doesn't do in this particular talk, in all of his Answers in Genesis stuff, he always, you can find me here, 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 here. And what he doesn't mention typically is Facebook and Twitter, but he does have accounts there. This Twitter account is especially interesting. I have often been perplexed by it. In fact, for a long time, I was convinced it was a shadow account. It was somebody else who is emulating Nathaniel Jeanson. It wasn't actually Nathaniel Jeanson himself, but now I realize that it is, right, that he really does have this particular interest. And why do I say that I was even at all skeptical or wondered whether this was really Nathaniel Jeanson on Twitter, aside from the fact he never mentions his Twitter account to anyone, is who he's following and who his followers are. So you notice there's one follower. He's only following one person, and that is an Arabic account. That's the only person he's following. Here's the link to the. This is his Twitter link to the Rumble video. But here's just a snapshot of several hundred. Well, he has hundreds of followers on Twitter, and I'll say that now, it used to be a year ago, I would estimate that it was 85 to 90% Arabic-speaking Twitter profiles. Now it's about 50%. So a lot of other people have found his Twitter account and followed him there. But his followers look something like this. And I've never seen that on any other profile for any other creationist, right? In fact, I rarely ever bump into Arabic accounts and Islamic creationists or other forms of creationism from Islam. All right, I rarely see any combination of these things, never any shared interests, and yet here Nathaniel Jeanson has really a significant Arabic following, and I'm not really sure where that comes from. I saw some of that with Replacing Darwin, his previous book. And now, though, with TRACED, he seems to have picked up a much larger following. And so I'm not really sure what it is in his book that is attractive to this particular audience. And I'm not sure how he's cultivated that particular audience. Well, now, obviously, he is making videos for them. But I hadn't seen any evidence that he was at least outwardly, all right, on social media or publicly courting that particular audience. But now he really has gone all in terms of courting that particular audience. All right, so this is interesting. And it's interesting to me because, again, having followed young earth creationism, U.S. style, North American U.S. Creationism, and some to some extent European creationism, I've not really known much about Islamic young earth creationism or Islamic just creationism, because that is not just young earth creationism, but there's a fairly strong strand of intelligent design advocacy in some strains of Islam. And yeah, so let's take a look here. I just wanted to show you that he's also pushed this on his Truth Social account and his Getter account. And so now let's go back and let's look at Answers in Genesis. I think there's an intriguing thing going on here. And again, this is my observations and leading to what will obviously be some speculation, right? I can only speculate what the actual relationship is here between Nathaniel Jeanson, Answers in Genesis, and what their approach is. What conscious approach are they taking with respect to Islamic creationism? To what extent is creationism part of Islam? And that's a hard thing to get a handle on. You'll read different things in different places. There's a fairly strong contingent of followers of Islam that reject evolutionary biology. I don't think that should be surprising. But the whole young earth creationism, why a young earth? Where does that come from? And there's really only a couple sources. And one of those, which I'm going to show you later, I'll pick it up right now. Actually, it's really hard to pick up because it feels like about a 20-pound book. This thing right here, the Atlas of Creation, by, I'm not sure how to pronounce his name, Haran Yaharia, which is a pseudonym for a Turkish Islamicist who I love his Wikipedia profile. It says occupation cult leader. that's what's listed as cult leader. Leads some kind of. He has been a huge apologist for Islam, and he also has been really big in creationism. It is really one of the, over the last 40 years, is one of the prominent people who has created sort of a creationist movement within Islam. And he, way back in the 80s, actually approached the Institute for Creation Research about essentially getting materials and having some help promoting creation science. Not the Christian apologetic portion of creation science, but you have to understand that the Institute for Creation Research by Henry Morris back in the 80s was really, although they were a Christian organization and they certainly wanted to create followers of Christ, they very much were promoting themselves as a science, right? Creation science. That there's evidence out there in the world of a young earth, and we want to convince people by science alone. We don't even need the Bible to convince them. Now, of course, once they're convinced of a young earth, they can go look here in the Bible. We can show you, look, the Bible also, in our interpretation, supports a young earth. And so therefore, if you believe in this young earth, which we've just shown you is young, you also should probably consider the Bible to be true as well, since it is precipitated, was known before science even figured it out that the Earth is young. All right, so that's an evidentialist approach to Christian apologetics, in a sense. It's like, we're going to present you evidence of things that the Bible say is true, and then you'll be convinced that the Bible is true. And as we're going to see, Ken Ham really doesn't take that approach. The two come hand in hand. You can't really, in fact, I don't really think that Ken Ham thinks that anyone can believe in a young Earth without believing in the Bible. It's not something anyone's going to come to by just physical evidence and logic, right? Just science, creation science, showing them that the world is young. You have to have the right worldview glasses on, right? You have to have the right spectacles that say, like, I'm looking at the evidence through the eyes of knowing that the Earth is young because I know the truth from Scripture. So it does start from Scriptures, all right? Everything starts from Scriptures. If you have the right interpretation of Scripture, then you know the truth about the origins of the physical world. And then when you go to study the origins of the physical world, you will then be able to interpret the evidence in an appropriate way, such that you then see that evidence as supportive of a young Earth. ICR was, in a way, and this is very broad brush stuff here, but in a way, kind of starting from we can convince you with science, and you don't have to have any particular set of glasses on, right? You can actually come to this conclusion without having those glasses on of a predisposition to young Earth. So how does all this fit in here? Well, there was sort of a nascent attraction for some Islamicists that a young Earth also fit that same philosophy. It was really more of a Ken Ham philosophy, but nonetheless, they liked the idea of having this evidence. And so he being this guy right here, which I'll show you pictures of later, really, by brute force, by himself, essentially created an Islamic creationist movement, which persists today. I don't think it's really a very significant audience, but it got me, seeing Nathaniel Jeanson here and seeing his long list of followers. And surely they know who he works for and where he works, and his support of young Earth creationism. I find it really interesting. Oh yeah, Answers in Genesis. So Answers in Genesis, like I just was pointing out, Ken Ham has a different approach. You got to have the right worldview glasses on, and the right worldview glasses come from reading the Bible. All right, the Hebrew Bible, including the Old and New Testament. All right, so not the Quran. And so Ken Ham is not favorably disposed to, to treating Islam and the Quran as being an authoritative scripture. And so even though he'd be happy that they want to believe in a young Earth, as he said before, believing in it, I don't think I have the quote here, but he has an article where it's like, believing in the young Earth doesn't get you to heaven. Right? It's like, that's nice that you have the correct view of world history in his mind. But if you don't have the correct view of who God is and your need of a savior, then you're not going to go to heaven. And so he sees, Islamic creationists as being just as wrong as an evolutionary biologist in terms of their view of history and the world and ultimately their salvation. So here we go. Here in 2004, he had been asked to, at the time, speak to this growing group of people interested in the Middle East in creationism. But he had been asked to just come and give like the physical evidences of a young Earth, and more so like what's wrong with evolution, right? Come give us that talk. But of course, Ken Ham can't give that talk without also talking about how the scriptures demand that particular view. And then launching into a gospel presentation. And he's asked basically not to do that. Just come in as a creation science organization, come tell us about the science. We're happy to hear you talk about the science. But he refused to do that. because he can't separate the two. And I'm not saying there's anything necessarily wrong with Ken Ham, being, I think, consistent, right, in this case. So here's just the title of the article, or a short blog post he wrote after that event: Battling False Religions. Many might be surprised that I would turn down an invitation to speak to a group of Muslims, but I don't want to be any part of their creation evangelism. Right? They're trying to use the evidence of a young earth to evangelize themselves, right? To create followers of Islam. And so he's like, I don't want to be any part of that because that's leading to false religion. And so never shall the young earth creationism of Christianity and the young earth creationism of Islam ever, mix, right? You go your way, we'll go ours. If you want to read our material and pick up on some of the evidence and use it for yourself, that's fine, but we're not going to support you in any way. All of this is quite fascinating because there aren't many young earth creationists out there. And I've always said that, I've always felt that if the evidence was obvious that the world is young, there should be many other people outside of Christianity who recognize that. I mean, not everybody can be under some sort of grip of the devil who is shielding the eyes of all those who aren't enlightened to see this young earth. There's no reason why people couldn't look at the evidence and come to the conclusion of a young earth and simply not believe in God still. I mean, people find plenty of reasons to reject God. They don't need to they don't need to be forced into evolution or to deny God. And so here you have a group of people that are supportive of a young earth, who think that there might be reasons to believe that the world is young. Now, eventually, it appears that their reasons are kind of similar to what Ken Ham's reasons are, which is a set of worldview glasses, right? Through their worldview glasses of the Quran and their particular interpretation of the Quran. And you see, there's the same type of thing that happens in U.S. Christianity or Protestant Christianity. There's multiple interpretations of Genesis. Well, there's multiple interpretations of the Quran with respect to world history as well. But their approaches are very similar in the sense that it's not necessarily the evidence itself. Like, you've become convinced of a young earth and it's like, oh, okay, wow, I see the world is young. What else supports the world being young? Which religion? Oh, here's a religion that actually has suggested for a long time that the world is young. Therefore, more reason for me to believe in that particular religion. That's really not what's happening there. It's the same type of thing that Ken Ham is doing, which is saying, like, you can put your worldview glasses on, have the right, correct view of history, and then you're going to see the evidence that the world is young. You're not going to come over the other way around. It's a presuppositionalist, viewpoint versus more of an evidentialist. So here's an article in 2010 referring to Turkey in particular. Why Turkey in particular? This guy right here is from Turkey and has a large amount of influence there, and that's where his... what else do I have here? What was I going to say? Christians must consider... So here's Ken Ham talking. Well, on the one hand, it's heartening to learn that Turkish scientists and other Muslims are holding conferences and writing books that call evolution into question and promote the idea of a creator. Christians must consider the, on the other hand, he's saying, Christians must consider the aim of Muslim creationism. What is the aim of Muslim creation? Some very good science may result from Muslim efforts. Maybe they'll, they're trying to understand the evidence, and maybe they'll come up with some additional evidences. Maybe we could borrow from them, just strictly speaking on the science. Just as much good science has resulted from humanistic efforts. Interesting that he would throw that in. Humanists who don't believe in God at all, they've actually come up with some useful stuff from science too. And sure, they might come up with some useful stuff, but just because you come up with useful stuff doesn't mean we should support you, right? But recognizing a creator who is not the creator of the Bible will bring a person no closer to the only one whom to know is life eternal. Christians must not uncritically take the position of the Middle East proverb, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, right? We're not going to get in bed with those who we have a joint enemy, and so therefore we're going to work together. Nope, we're not. We should resist any challenge to the authority of the Bible, whether it comes from Muslim creationist or an atheist evolutionist. Let's skip through that. Do all creationists go to heaven? Oh, yes, I did have this. Sorry. This is 2008 in Answers Magazine. Not all creationists will go to heaven, but heaven awaits all creationists who place their trust in Jesus Christ. So true young earth creationism is a pretty exclusive club. And even if others want to support the evidence of a young earth, great, more power to you, but we're not going to work with you, and we're barely even going to acknowledge you. So with Ken Ham's rejection of any kind of effort to acknowledge Islamic young earth creationism as fellow believers in a similar scientific worldview, all right, or similar history of the earth, that seems to have been the way things have been, with Answers in Genesis ever since then. And I've looked at other young earth creationist organizations, and essentially they kind of have pretty much a hands-off approach too. Okay, so this brings us back around to Nathaniel Jeanson and the relationship between Nathaniel Jeanson, Answers in Genesis, and Ken Ham. What's going on here? Here you have Nathaniel Jeanson, who is working with an Arabic speaker in order to translate his materials for an Arabic-speaking audience. And that's pretty unusual in the world of young earth creationism. He's obviously doing this with the blessing of Ken Ham. He's using Answers in Genesis resources. But blessing is not full support, right? This isn't like this is an initiative of Answers in Genesis. No, it's pretty clear this is not an initiative of Answers in Genesis. This isn't something that Answers in Genesis is going to be promoting. Now, Ken Ham could come along and prove me wrong tomorrow. He might tweet this out and say, like, everybody's got to watch this. This is great. We need to, address this audience and so forth. But I'm thinking that's not going to happen. So what Nathaniel Jeanson seems to be doing here is he is saying, I'll address this particular audience, and I'm not going to ruffle any feathers with them. I'm going to present the evidence from my book, right? As he fancies himself like the scientist, right? I've done all these investigations of the Y chromosome and revealed important things about human history, irrespective of whatever I've learned from the Bible. I think I could have drawn this history out from just the evidence itself. And so I can present that to an audience without, having the gospel message in there and talking about the Bible and how the Bible informs my message. I have this message, right? And I'll speak as a scientist to this audience. And so that looks like what he's doing. Now, I'll be interested in future episodes. Maybe he'll throw in the gospel message, and maybe he'll be an evangelist to that particular community. I think he has a heart for that particular community, and he obviously has some kind of connection there. I don't know where he derived that original connection, who contacted him, how he made these connections, but he is using those connections to reach an audience that typically young earth creationists aren't meeting or interacting with at all. And so it looks to me like Ken Ham saying, yeah, this is, something you feel passionate about. Go ahead and do this. You find a way to interact with them in whatever way you can. Ken Ham couldn't do this kind of thing because he's not going to be able to just present science. He's going to have to present a biblical message. But maybe Nathaniel Jeanson, in his capacity as a scientist, can do that. So he's approaching this audience, but Ken Ham's not putting this on Answers in Genesis website, right? It's not like, I'm going to push this out to a greater audience. I guess it doesn't really fit either, because it's not who the typical person coming to the Answers in Genesis website is. So he doesn't want to clutter up the YouTube page with Arabic-speaking translations. Now they have lots of stuff in Spanish and so forth, but they do kind of segregate that into different categories. So Nathaniel Jeanson sort of left on his own to do this, so he's promoting it himself, and so I'll be interested to see where this goes and how this interaction proceeds, and I'll see if Kenham or others in Answers in Genesis ever really acknowledge this side of Nathaniel Jeanson's work. One other thing. Yeah, it's a rambly episode of This Week in Creationism. And really, this is just, I hope this is just an interesting observation about how Answers in Genesis works and thinks about their approach to apologetics. But let me go back to this book because I was going to say something about this. All right, so by the way, this thing is hefty. And this is only volume 1. There's 3 volumes of this. It's like, well, what is in this thing? This was a huge production by this cultist who he's put out hundreds of pieces of literature that are I think I can, like here in the back, all these pictures. Oh, these are all of his other books. He's written all these other books, right? Pamphlets, like literally, there are a bunch of children's books down here. I know you can't quite see that, but yeah, it just keeps going and going. All right? The miracle of creation, the miracle of proteins, the secrets of DNA, the miracle of the cell, the miracle of the honeybee, the miracle of the microbiology world, the miracle of the ant. Some of these are pamphlets. These are all in different languages. You got Russian, French, Arabic. Right? Every one of these is a book cover of a book under his name. But we also have things about the Holocaust and about communism, about the evils of this and that. Amber and sulfate. So also by this author. So he is prolific. Right? And then the book itself, I'm having a lot of trouble holding this up because seriously, it is 15 pounds or so. All right, so here we go. Here's the book. It is these large, full color, amazing shots of fossils throughout. All right, it's pretty cool. Now, how did I get it? He sent me a copy. Thank you very much. He also sent thousands of other scientists copies of this. Like a lot of people. This is a huge investment. A lot of money. Most of those books, all right, are not really even for sale. They're things he's giving away. Right? He's wealthy and he's spending his wealth promoting Islamic creationism. Now, this is really mostly intelligent design. This book, I could sum it all up. I can sum up Volume 1, Volume 2, and Volume 3. This is hundreds of pages of, look at this fossil. Now, look at this other organism at the bottom of the page, which is alive today. And look how similar they are. Oh, looky here. You see that? There's a starfish. Oh, look, there's a starfish in the fossil record. You can hardly tell the difference. Today's starfish have the same characteristics as starfish from millions of years ago, revealing the starfish have remained exactly the same for 360 million years. This refutes the claim of evolutionists and shows that living things were created with the same features as they have now. Okay, let's take a look at another page. Oh, look, pipefish. This vertebrate belongs to the same suborder and apparently the same species potentially. The fossil pipefish between 25 and 5 million years ago is identical to those of today. This refutes Darwinism, who asserts that living things have gradually evolved and should change over time. That's another variation of the same thing. This is 700 pages of pictures of fossils, along with something that looks similar today. And after each one, he has a short blurb, and it says that exact same thing. Yeah, over and over and over. I mean, you're literally going to flip pages and you're going to read the same exact thing over and over again. I have to show you one page because it's kind of funny. Page 244. Page 244. And I've talked about mayflies, right, on my site. This isn't exactly a mayfly, but it's pretty close. Caddisfly. Okay, here we go. See that right there? There's a piece of amber. And that piece of amber has a caddisfly in it. And so below here it says, pictured are a caddisfly and fungus gnats in amber. These living things have survived for millions of years without the slightest change in their structures. The fact that these insects never changed is a sign they never evolved. It's another variation, right, on the same thing. Take a look at your caddisfly, living caddisfly. You see that? I'm going to hold it up really close here. You see that hook, its abdomen coming around there? Can I do this? Can I hold it up on my shoulder and point at the same time? I don't know. Here we go, right there. Yeah, that's a metal hook. The fly is a... that's a... oh man, I can't even remember the name of it now. It's for fly fishermen, right? Somebody made it, right? And so he found a picture on the internet looking for that particular insect to compare to the fossil. Found that picture, but didn't look at it carefully enough and put it in this book. See, it's exactly the same. It has exactly the same features as in the past. Right. I mean, that's kind of funny, but let's just do one other. And I'm opening to random pages here, other than page 244. I was like, there you go. What does he say here? Gastropods that lived 410 to 360 million years ago are identical to today's specimens. Identical. These creatures that have remained unchanged despite intervening millions of years are important evidence that living things never underwent the evolutionary process. That's the... Okay. You got the idea? It's like, you're just going to flip one page after that. That's that book. Now, there is a little section in the back after page 800 or so, and it is written out form of the same message, but he also has a bunch of other evidences of creation in there, both young earth creationism, but mostly intelligent design. So I said I could sum up all three volumes, and I summed it up by reading you those descriptions because that's the summation of the three things. But to put it in words myself, it is intelligent design via life hasn't changed, right? And so whatever God created in the past is exactly the same as in the present. He's very much a denier of even really speciation. So a fairly extreme version of young earth creationism. And he's really not so much focused on the young earth part. It doesn't have a whole lot about the young earth, and not really that interested in the flood and so forth. And it's more about anti-evolution and the evils of evolution causing communism and Marxism and all these different evils that are in the world, and social evils. So in that way, he has a pretty strong affinity to somebody like Ken Ham in terms of his approach to, evolution causes all the problems that humanity is facing. And if we could understand that evolution didn't happen, then we would appreciate the creator. Now, of course, his creator is a different creator than Ken Ham's creator, which is why they're completely incompatible. So Jeanson, I don't know if in the back of his mind he's thinking like this is an opening and that eventually I can evangelize this particular community, that I can present the gospel to them. Or he's simply looking for people that are interested in his work, because honestly, he's got to be a little desperate to find people interested in his work. Sure, Answers in Genesis published his book, and they've been rah-ing it like it's all great stuff. But other creationists have just been like, whatever, not really paying attention. If anything, they've been critical of his work. And so he's not getting a lot of love. He's certainly not getting a lot of love outside of young earth creationism. And he's not really getting a whole lot of love within young earth creationism in terms of buying his arguments and taking them up and making them into the beginning of a revolution of creation genetics. And so here he has a very interested audience. I've seen that, like, the comments on his social media platforms, especially Twitter, which seems to be where most of this action is for him, is from Arabic-speaking audience who are really interested and intrigued by the human history aspect of his Y chromosome research. And so I can see why he's interested in engaging with them, because it's a form of engagement. He wants engagement, right? He wants to be able to have an audience to speak to, and maybe this is the audience that he can find that is finding interest in his work. All right, so I'm babbling now, but I keep coming back to this book. So I said that I got a copy of this, and that Harun sent this book out to thousands of scientists as an evangelical outreach, right? Because he's convinced that if he could convince the scientific community around the world of the fact that evolution is completely false, and every page in this book is just one piece of evidence. I mean, he would view it as each page is an evidence against evolution. And so if you add it all up, once you get to 3 volumes, you have thousands of pieces of evidence that suggest that evolution can't happen. Now, if you've watched any of my videos, I've talked about this exact thing. This is the exact problem, because this is just what Ken Ham says, right? This book is just a longer list of things that Ken Ham does like every other month. Oh, look at this fossil in amber. It kind of looks like something that's alive today. Hence, this organism hasn't changed, right? It hasn't changed into any different kind of thing. And I've talked to you about how that's a misconception of the expectation of evolutionary theory, and about how the statement itself is just not actually true. All right. All these things just on the surface of it, yes, that organism in that amber there, you can't see it very well, does look a lot like a wasp, and it is a type of wasp. But just because morphologically, externally, something looks similar, doesn't mean that the organism hasn't experienced an incredible amount of change, defined as like internal physiological and especially genomic change. All right, so he sent that book out to, like I said, thousands of people, and I think there's probably a couple other copies of this floating around my own department from other faculty who got this book. I kept it, of course, because I find it really fascinating, and the pictures are awesome. I mean, they're just like, these are some of the best pictures of fossils, and I have taken pictures out of this book to use on like videos and blogs and so forth as a source of the images, because the images are really pretty awesome. They're not all accurately cited. That is a problem. But nonetheless, it's a pretty cool book to flip through as a picture book. And you don't have to read the text, because once you've read the text on one page, you're done. Like, you've read the text from every page. It's the same thing over and over again. It kind of cracks me up. Like, how many different ways can you write those 2 sentences and not exactly copy it, paste it, but it essentially is copy paste. You just wanted to make it sound slightly different on each page. And so I haven't checked to see if he actually accomplishes that, where all 700 pages don't have the same exact words. Like, I think he's got to repeat somewhere. I'm sure he probably does. All right, that's my story of tracing an observation from Nathaniel Jeanson's recent foray into speaking to an Arabic audience. And because I know he's been begged to do this. Like, I've seen people ask him, like, you need to put this in Arabic and reach us, and I have questions, and we want to be able to have a forum where we can ask you things. And so he appears to have found a translator who's willing to work with him. And so it'll be kind of interesting to see where this goes, and then see how Ken Ham and Answers in Genesis, whether they ever incorporate or acknowledge this particular effort of Nathaniel Jeanson's, or whether this truly is a side project. And it's like, yeah, you can do that. You can do this from your office at work. But, this is a separate thing. This is your thing. And whatever happens there, we're not taking responsibility for down the line. All right, that's it for me today. This Week in Creationism, episode number 41. We'll be back with episode 42 soon. I got a whole bunch of stuff lined up. I'm going to do like a hodgepodge of different things that are happening and kind of like hit them in quick succession. That's it. Talk to you later. Hit like, subscribe, all that good stuff. I'm Joel Duff. Bye-bye.